what do you think is a better use of time and resources? Trying to start a company or giving away money to the worthiest cause?
Oh, I mean, I think overwhelmingly the former. So overwhelmingly the former. So, and this is an argument, right, that very, very few people in our modern, kind of society, modern, whatever civil religion are willing to make. But I'll make it, which is production is a good of itself, right? Like the person who makes your toothpaste is doing, the company that makes your toothpaste is doing something for you, right? That is superior to that of most people doing health philanthropy, right? Like production of the goods and services that make our lives better, right? And at the limit, the goods and services that like cure diseases and so forth, they're generally for-profit companies. The fact that they make money on those things is just reward for having improved the world. I think most of the actual material progress in the world, most of the improvement in human welfare is done through for-profit production. So there are people who are like basically capitalism, building a company is a necessary evil to generate the money with which we can then make the world better. I'm like, no, that's not the case. Like most of the good you're going to do in the world is going to be through building your company. And then maybe you're going to find a way to do some philanthropy thing. Hopefully the philanthropy thing that you do is not going to make the world worse and not better, which is often an interesting question. Here's the other reason I believe that so strongly, which is, and again, let's assume some sort of properly functioning capitalism, right, with some level of effective competition in the market. Production in the for-profit system, like the products succeed or fail, they're adopted or they're not adopted on the basis of whether people want them, right, and whether people think that they make their lives better and people want to engage in that trade. And so there's a direct reality test with every transaction, right, as to whether this is actually something that people want and whether this is something that people think will improve their lives. There is this massive issue with philanthropy, which has always been an issue and it continues to be an issue, which is it's not subject to a market test. And so, there are, reams and reams and reams of examples and studies of philanthropic programs that, thought that they were going to, lead to some sort of beneficial outcome in some area. And then it turned out they, backfire horribly. Right. And, there's an obvious one just kind of staring us all in our face today, which is, criminal justice reform. Right. There's been this wave of philanthropists, many of whom I know over the course of the last 20 years who have, spent an enormous amount of money putting in place a new set of politicians and a new set of political ideas that have resulted in letting the criminals out of jail. And as a for justice. And as a consequence, like crime is through the roof and it's like not safe to be in the streets. And it's just like, but like there's no market test. Like the people who have spent all of that money, right, to let all the criminals out, like they're not subject to the risk of all the criminals being out because they all have like Navy SEAL teams protecting them, right? Because they're all like rich, right? And so they're able to just like arbitrarily like ruin society, through philanthropic efforts with no corrective mechanism whatsoever. And so if anything, the world we're in today, like the dichotomy between like the actual good of production and then the actual evil of sort of the unintended consequences of sort of untested quote unquote philanthropy, like I think those are gapping out in a pretty profound way. Again, it's hard for me to even talk about this with most people because I think it's kind of obvious. It's like walk down the street in San Francisco. It's pretty obvious what's happening. And yet like the level of denial among a lot of people I talk to about this is like through the roof. So
there's also the kind of, this sometimes shows up in the kind of effective altruist critique, right? Where you say, well, why give to the opera when people are dying of malaria, right? That's the sort of the previous effective altruist critique, I guess. What do you give to, if anything?
Well, by the way, the malaria thing, this goes to the nature of the problem, right? The nature of the philanthropy problem, the nature of the effective altruism problem, which is right. Okay, fair enough. Like, don't give to the opera because people are dying of malaria. It's okay. What do we do to keep people from dying from malaria? Well, we give them bed nets, right? And the bed nets are like treated with chemicals that like, prevent the mosquitoes from being able to, to be able to, to spread malaria. Okay. But now we've given people, nets that are treated with chemicals and then they turn around and they use those nets to go fishing, but they use the, and then the chemical treatment on the nets ruins the fishing environment, right? Like, and now people starve, right? And it's like, and by the way, maybe that happens and maybe it doesn't, but like it's happening 8,000 miles away, right? In a way that you're never going to even know like what's happening. And so these like cosmic big brain utilitarian EA ideas that people are going to like have an Excel spreadsheet where they're going to figure this stuff out, or they're going to sit on the campus at Stanford or Oxford or something and have these ideas that it's going to translate into the real world. I mean, my favorite example, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but my favorite example I keep trying to get all my friends to read is the Moynihan report from 1965. So, right, Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote this report about the rate of single parenthood in the U.S. In 1965, and he sort of, and a lot of social scientists will tell you like a huge number of life outcomes, at the very least, correlate to whether you grew up in a double parent or single parent home. And so the Moynihan was like the leading light of like the liberal progressive, reform movement in 1965 with LBJ, with the Great Society. And he had the full resources of the government, like unlimited capability, consultation with experts. And he wrote this report, and it was like, we have this huge crisis because of the percentage of unwed, births. And then as a consequence, we're going to implement all of these incredible programs, both government programs and philanthropic programs, to fix this. And then fast forward, sitting here today, 50 years later, the percentage of unwed births has tripled, right? And right, by the way, with no accounting, right? Like with no accounting, no accountability, he's dead. He doesn't have to live with the consequences. Nobody's looking at this. Nobody cares. Maybe you guys write a story on it, or Fox News. Somebody does it, but like nobody cares. Like, and those programs continue on autopilot forever. And so I just find it's like this remote control aspect to it is just like incredibly disturbing. It doesn't work. And again, I go back to this is the thing, like any business, any for-profit business any legitimate for-profit business that operates in a true competitive market cannot do this. The market will prevent them from doing this, because if they do this, the market will stop them. The market will say, no, I do not want you to do this anymore. I will not buy this thing anymore, right? And you will go away, right? And there's no equivalent pressure whatsoever on a foundation or a philanthropist. So anyway, what do we do? So specifically what we do is we basically stick very, very, very close to home. And specifically what we do is basically local social infrastructure, and in particular, we do emergency medicine. And so we do, and specifically at Stanford. So, we basically fund Stanford Emergency Medicine, the whole program there. And basically under a couple of theories. Number one is, whatever you feel about our healthcare system, it is true that at 3 a.m, when your kid has a fever of 105, or, somebody, has a serious problem, everybody's kind of equal at the ER at 3 a.m. And so, it is the ultimate backstop for medical care for everybody. And then the other is like any given day, I can go sit in the ER and I can see the patients, right? And I can see the outcomes, right? And I don't have to wonder whether like this is a good idea or a bad idea. Like I can see the benefit. Like there's no remote control aspect to it at all. It's like right there. It's like 10 minutes from my house. And so, that's the kind of thing we do. And it's to at least try to live up to the spirit of, let's say, trying to make the world a better place, but also trying to do it in a way where we can actually prove that we're actually doing that.